At 23 minutes past 1 in the morning on Saturday 26th of April 1986, something rather unfortunate happened inside Reactor 4 at Chernobyl. A major but already known flaw in the LBMK reactor's AZ5 button had caused Reactor 4 to experience a rather violent deconstruction. And as a result of this, spicy air known as radiation is now freely flowing out the newly opened roof in the reactor building. So much, in fact, it appears they've made a Minecraft beacon. This explosion and the following fire is spreading radiation at an alarming rate, without control. This radiation is being carried by the wind over northern Ukraine in the direction of Sweden. If allowed to spread and burn unimpeded, it would render northeastern Europe uninhabitable for a while at least. This could all be made worse by something that hasn't actually left Chernobyl since the disaster started, at least not the main body of it, and this is the reactor itself. It is reasonably hot at a balmy 2600 degrees centigrade and is burning its way through the containment chamber and the 8 feet thick concrete pad underneath. Below this there is a large concrete tank that holds 19 million litres of water used to cool the core, evidently not working very well, if at all, and the superheated molten reactor enters this tank in this worst case scenario and comes into contact with this water. It will instantly vaporise and cause a massive steam explosion which will completely destroy the power plant and up to the 4 other reactors and send all the nuclear fuel in them into the atmosphere, greatly amplifying the fallout. In simpler words, not good. But they had a plan. To prevent the power plant from ammo-racking itself, again, they needed to send 3 men to manually turn some water release valves deep within the pitch-black, heavily irradiated corridors of Chernobyl, of which all were flooded from the firefighting crew spraying water over the reactor to extinguish it. Either way, this meant that the pitch-black, flooded, irradiated tunnels 3 men would have to navigate through to turn these water release valves to save Europe from another worse catastrophe, a task which they were told would most certainly be fatal, and fatal in a way no person deserves by way of radiation poisoning. Quite possibly one of the slowest and most painful way to die. Regardless, 3 men volunteered for the job. The names were Alexei Ananenko, Valery Bezpalov, and Boris Baranov. The 3 were briefed on the task at hand. The risk not only for themselves but all of Europe was mounting. They were dressed in wetsuits, equipped with just a flashlight. The 3 volunteers jumped into the darkness of the basement below and went in search of the crucial valves. The events that follow have been turned somewhat into a modern myth. For decades after the event, it was widely reported that these 3 men swam through the radioactive water in near darkness, miraculously located the valves, and even after their flashlight had died, escaped. But were already showing signs of acute radiation syndrome, and sadly succumbed to the radiation poisoning a short while later. They were apparently buried in their coffins. It's a lie, they didn't die, and they certainly received a significant dose, enough for visible health decline, but not enough to kill them. Andrew Leverbarrow, the author of the 2016 book Chernobyl 1 hour 23 minutes 40 seconds, spent 5 years researching the disaster and discovered a slightly different, yet no less heroic turn of events. As previously stated, the basement was flooded with radioactive water, but firefighters had previously pumped some of it out. So, by the time the men jumped into the water, it was only at knee height. They weren't the first to enter, either, as others had gone into the basement before to measure radiation levels, although little is known about the fate of these people. The discovery of the valves was still miraculous though. As Leverbarrow states, the men entered the basement in wetsuits, radioactive water up to their knees, in a corridor stuck with a myriad of pipes and valves. It was like finding a needle in a haystack. Yet, they found that needle before the molten reactor core above them had melted its way down through the ceiling. A sigh of relief was breathed all around. The men excitedly left the basement as heroes and rejoiced with their colleagues over a job well done. Ananenko was later quoted as saying to the Soviet media, "Everyone at Chernobyl nuclear power station was watching this operation. When the searchlight beam fell on a pipe, we were joyous. The pipe led to the valves. We heard a rush of water out the tank. Although our knowledge of the event is now somewhat clearer thanks to Leverbarrow's research, he admitted that some of the best sources on the subject of Chernobyl have yet to be translated, since the Soviet government wanted to downplay the disaster. Over 30 years later, and the true scale of the destruction caused by Chernobyl is still a hotly debated subject. What is not up for debate, though, is the incredible level of bravery shown by these men on that fateful day in May 1986. They knew exactly the risks involved and were prepared to give up everything in order to save the lives of an incomprehensible number of people. It's become part of the unofficial lore of Chernobyl that these 3 intrepid divers sacrificed their lives to save millions, succumbing to acute radiation syndrome in the immediate aftermath of their mission. The reality is much more positive than the myth, with all 3 men escaping such a grisly fate. Indeed, Alexei Ananenko and Valery Bespalov are both still alive as of 2025, while Boris Baranov lived until about 205 when he passed of heart disease, unrelated to the radiation he received during service. Unfortunately, it's those who deserve the most recognition who receive the least, and is this very much the case in this situation. The lives of millions can be owed to these 3 men and their willingness to do the improbable to save the greater populace.